So we've got our table in a pretty good spot now. We can search for different cities and we see them all pop up in a line. It's time to start getting work done on our temperature, pressure, and humidity charts now. I'm going to pull up our mock-up like so. And you'll notice that for each of those different columns, we've got one individual chart. So don't worry, we're not going to build the charts from scratch. Instead, we're going to make use of an awesome little third-party library called React Sparklines. I'm going to hop over to the documentation page for React Sparklines really quick. In my browser, I'm just going to search for React Sparkline. And it should come up as the first result here. Cool. So you can see these are examples of animated sparklines. And this one looks a little bit more like what ours is probably going to end up looking like. So using sparklines is super, super easy, and we're using them specifically because they're so easy to get started with. Check out an example right here. We use the sparklines component. We pass it some data, which is just an array of numbers. We provide a width and height for it, and that's pretty much it. We don't actually have to specify the limit or the margin on here. We can change the color by defining a sparklines line and passing a color to it as well. So notice how this call is structured right here. We've got a parent element of sparklines. It has the data, and then a child element of sparklines line, which holds the actual color. So in other words, we configure the sparkline by passing some child component inside of it as a child. Okay, so using sparklines, as you can probably tell, is pretty darn straightforward. Really going to breeze through this particular part. The part of this application that's going to start to get a little bit more challenging is figuring out exactly how our data is going to come in here. So notice how the sparklines expects just an array of plain numbers. It doesn't really know what to do if we pass it an object or anything like that. So we need to somehow make sure that we pass it just a plain array of flat numbers. That's it, nothing else. I'm going to pull up another diagram, one that we've seen already, but I've made a couple changes to. So again, this is our Redux state. We've got our weather property, which is an array that holds a bunch of city data objects. So we've got one for San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Dallas. As we already discussed, each one of these objects is going to produce an individual row in the city. Let's zoom in on one now and look at San Francisco. So again, we need to produce an array of numbers for the temperature, the humidity, and the pressure. These properties are nested under list, which is an array, and then main, which is an object that contains the temperature, humidity, and pressure. So basically what our job is we need to take all these different temperatures that's contained inside the list and get them all out as a simple flat array for temperature, humidity, and pressure, 3 separate arrays. So that's the challenge we have ahead of us. In practice, this is going to be not too bad by using the map function again. We can say for any given city, city data dot list dot main dot temp, and that would be the temp. Well, specifically what we'd be saying is city data dot list dot map, and then inside of the map we'll get access to the main, and then temperature, blah, 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 and all that good stuff. Whatever, let's just go ahead and give it a shot before I make it sound more complicated than it really is, because it's really not going to be that bad. Okay, so first we're going to assemble our data and console log it just to make sure we're doing that part right. After we get that part right, we'll go ahead and install the Sparklines package and put together our first chart. So I'm here inside of weather list, inside of render weather. Remember, this function right here is for rendering a single city, a single row. So the first thing we're going to do is pull off an array of temperatures. So just as I mentioned, we'll take city data dot list. So this is a list of all the different forecasts for this particular city, one for every 3 hours over the next 5 days. And then we'll map over it. Inside of the map, we'll pass a function, and we're going to assume that we're just going to say that the argument is going to be called weather. And then we'll say weather.main.temp. So again, let's look at that one more time on the chart. Here we go. Let's zoom in. So render weather is called with city data, which is essentially this box right here. We take citydata.list, which is, here's the list right here. We map over it, and each one of these objects right here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, are passed into this function as the argument weather. So for each of those, we say weather.main.temp, and that will return the temperature of, in this mock-up right here, 260 Kelvin. Again, remember all these measurements are in Kelvin, which is just a different unit system for temperatures. So I think we got it. This is looking pretty good here. We map over the list, we pull off the temperature, and we assign it to temps. Let's go ahead and console log this just to make sure we pulled off the appropriate data. So I'll console log it, we'll flip back over to the browser, refresh, and search for Tampa. And we get an array. Awesome, exactly what we wanted. So it's just a plain flat array of numbers. That's exactly what the Sparklines library needs. So I think we're in a pretty good spot here. All we need to do now is go ahead and install the Sparklines library. So we'll do this in the same way that we've installed all this other stuff. All we got to do is hit npm install -- save react Sparklines. Okay, so that's installed now. So inside of weather list, we'll build our first chart. At the top, we're going to import Sparklines and Sparklines line. Remember, this is the parent, the actual chart element, whereas this is a child element that we pass in that provides some additional configuration. If this seems confusing at all, don't hesitate to go check out the documentation again. Again, you can get here by just doing a Google search for React Sparklines. They've also got a separate page set up for a couple more demos and a little bit more info about all the different configuration. Okay, so we've got our Sparklines object. Let's add this as a new TD because it's going to be in a different column. So we'll say Sparklines, and I'm going to choose a height of 120 and a width of 180. These are pixel values. If you decide that you want your chart to be larger or smaller, you can just change it right here. Then we'll pass in our data, which is the array of temperatures, temps. So here's our data, temps. We'll close the Sparklines tag and then add our Sparklines line. Remember, the first L, Sparklines, is lowercase, not capital. Then the purpose of this one is to just specify our color, which is just going to be red. You can specify a different color if you'd like. Again, refer to the docs if you want to see all the different colors that are available. Okay, so I'm going to save this. Let's test it out in the browser. I'll refresh. Oh, it looks like I've got cannot find module here, which means I made a typo somewhere. I'm going to flip over to my terminal, and it looks like I messed up the import statement at the top. Didn't finish it off. I got distracted. All right, so from React Sparklines. My mistake. Let's give it another shot. All right, that worked out. So let's try Phoenix. And awesome, we've got a chart. Let's try Tampa, Boston, San Francisco, Seattle. And we get a chart for each of them. Perfect, just what we wanted. Let's go ahead and continue in the next section.